get started? I'd ask everybody if you can grab a seat at one of the tables and one of the chairs. Got quiet pretty quickly. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, on behalf of the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce, I want to really, first of all, thank you for taking time to come and welcome you all to CannaBusiness. This is an event that we are very, very proud of. We have some great partners here on this. I'm going to reinforce a couple times the nature of today, and I'll be clear up front. This is not an event to take a position one way or another. This is an event to explore all aspects of this, to really be heard from a number of experts. We have a great array of experts, speakers, presenters, and panelists today that I think will really spark a conversation. We have a number of people here coming, you'll be meeting today, who have key positions in the state. And so what comes up today and what is discussed may very well impact state policy down the road. So it is timely, and I think it's going to be just a great event. And I appreciate the attendance here. We didn't know what to expect. I was getting emails in the middle of the night last night to be squeezed in, and we're trying to make sure we don't turn anybody away, trying to get everybody here. A couple of people I want to thank before we start. We cannot do this without sponsorships. So Avani Technology Solutions, they are the sponsor of this whole Trends business series that Chambers have, so I thank Avani. We have two major sponsors for this event. We have Columbia Care and DeJoy, Knopf, and Blood. I want to thank both of them. Our key sponsor is Boyle & Code, and we have a number of supporting sponsors that we listed on the screens throughout today. We thank them very much. You'll be meeting some of the key speakers. We have at least 3 elected officials that are in the audience. I want to thank them for coming. We have Assemblymember Harry Bronson, who's here, Assemblywoman Jamie Romeo, and Assemblyman Mark Johns. I want to thank them for coming. They're not going to be on the panel, but they're really here to listen and to really take in what's being said today. And I go back to what I just started to say before. This is a time where, if you look at the political winds in New York State, there is a very, very strong sense that marijuana and cannabis will be legalized in the state, if not 2019, 2020. We can't say for sure if that's going to happen, but if you read every day, they're discussing this in the Assembly, the Senate, and the Governor's Executive Chamber. It's not been something that started a short time ago. It's been on a discussion point for some time. So in anticipation that this may happen, we want to explore all sides of this. And some of the things we're going to ask today and push with the questions is, you can be for it or against it, and we respect everybody's opinion. That's why the Chamber is trying to make sure we show all aspects of this. But if it were to happen, if the Assembly, the Senate, and the Governor were to approve this in 2019 or 2020, what needs to happen to make this work? And what are the issues that people have or the opportunities? There's business opportunities, a number of economic opportunities, there's social health, law enforcement issues, legal issues, and we're showing everything. You'll hear today from our speakers. They're not going to all agree on this issue at all. They'll take certainly opposing viewpoints, but the thought-provoking part of this is, if it were to happen, how do we deal with that? How do we prepare for it? So that's the beauty of today. And I just appreciate people here, you're taking time out of your very busy schedules to come. We want to make sure we have time for questions at some point. We'll probably gather those during the day after speakers and panels as they finish, try and engage them. We're going to be serving lunch in between the last 2 panels at your table to save time, to allow to get going in a very short period of time. Before I bring up our partner on this, I want to thank, first of all, Susan George, the lady in red in the back, and her great events team. I want to thank her for all the work she has done putting this together. And around the room, our chamber team permeated this room. I thank all of them. Everybody's participated. The Hyatt has been a fantastic host of this event, so I thank them all. And we have a partner, Zach Sarkis, who leads Flower City Solutions. This event really was sparked. I want to give Zach great credit, because extremely bright young man. He invited me to an event at St. John Fisher College a few months ago that sparked this conversation about industrial hemp and the issue of cannabis. And so we have partnered on this event. He's a full partner with us. And I want to, before we start the program, invite Zach Sarkis to come up and give a welcome as well. Zach?
Well, greetings and welcome. Yeah, special thanks to Bob Duffy, to Susan George, she's truly incredible, and the whole Greater Rochester Chamber, really helping bring this event to fruition. Big thanks to our sponsors as well. Without your contributions, we really wouldn't be having this conversation today, so sincerely, thank you. Flower City Solutions is here to help local companies participate in the global cannabis economy, whether in hemp, recreational cannabis, or any adjacent business. When we started Flower City Solutions, we quickly realized that education and community building would be key factors for success. So last November, we hosted the first New York Hemp Lab conference at the Wegman School of Pharmacy at St. John Fisher. I'm happy to say it was a big success. We had 125 people come to hear hemp industry experts share their knowledge from the fields of medicine, material science, agricultural production, and more. Bob Duffy was there too, as he said, and from that day to this, he's been a constant advocate for our efforts and the broader opportunities at hand. So Bob, thank you. The New York Hemp Lab surpassed our expectations, and so much so that it's taken on a life of its own. Today, I'm happy to announce that with the support and encouragement of our community, we've successfully registered New York Hemp Lab as a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. Its mission, to serve as an industry incubator supporting economic growth and community development through a variety of educational events and services right here in Rochester and throughout the state. Please go to our website and sign up to stay in communication about events to come. We really look forward to working with you all. America's prohibition on cannabis has lasted for about 80 years. That's 6 times longer than the prohibition of alcohol, by the way. That means that as a country, we are 80 years behind in widespread research and development. 80 years behind in understanding how the cannabis family will impact major industries and create new ones down the road. It's true that other states have a head start on us with respect to recreational cannabis and even in hemp, but that's not going to last. Rochester has long been a center of innovation and entrepreneurship, and now it's our turn to show what we can do, from food, manufacturing, research, medicine, and more. Moments like this don't come around often, and we need to make the most of it. And while we're at it, we need to address the important issues like culture, race, justice, sustainability, workforce development, technology, taxation, and so on. Based on the size and enthusiasm of today's gathering, I think we're off to a great start. As Bob said, this event is the first of many to come. We look forward to a continued partnership with the Chamber, and we're committed to creating a cannabis economy that's supporting the many and not just the few. So on behalf of the Chamber, my team, our sponsors, thank you so much for being here, and we welcome you to a great day.
Thank you, Zach. Now we're going to start with our very first keynote. We are very lucky to have Jim Bourdeau, who is the Executive Vice President and General Counsel for Constellation Brands. In this role, Jim serves as the company's Chief Legal Officer, responsible for governance, community, and government affairs, and company-wide legal functions. Jim joined Constellation Brands in 2014 as Senior Vice President and General Counsel for Corporate Development, where he was involved in activities related to the formation, financing, and expansion of business operations, mergers and acquisitions, and venture financing. Constellation Brands is one of our great legacy companies here in Rochester. Rob Sands is the chair of the board for our chamber. They make extraordinary decisions, very futuristic thinking in terms of what they do, and we are so proud to have Jim here and so proud to have Rob Sands' support to have Jim. So please welcome Jim Bourdeau. Jim.
Thanks, Bob. I'm just going to put the mic down. Well, good morning, everybody. I knew it might be crowded, but we seem to have filled the place. I want to take you on a quick little journey about once upon a time 2 years ago. The General Counsel of Constellation Brands woke up to read in the public press that the CEO of our company said, yeah, we're thinking about getting involved in cannabis. And immediately, Mad Money and Jim Cramer were coining him the king of cannabis. So you can imagine, what is this like for a lawyer to find out that his Fortune 500 company is going to get involved in cannabis? Well, you sit down with the board, and you're in very, very difficult discussions, very serious discussions. Just like you do when you talk about wine, or we're going to introduce a new whiskey, right? And immediately it starts to go, well, it's high time we're involved. Snicker. Maybe we'll form a joint venture. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, right? And you find these adults are like snickering and laughing, and they think it's all real funny, right? And I'm sitting there going, well, okay, what do the lawyers think? Okay, yeah, this is real funny. It's the Controlled Substances Act. It's on Schedule 1. This is what happens. Where you want to talk to a bunch of directors and tell them that the business they're looking to get involved in can send them to jail, that sends everybody back to rethink it all. But there's a lot of pressure on companies, right, when it comes to cannabis. Right now, in the United States, 33 states have legalized the use of cannabis for medicinal purposes. 14 states have made special regulations with respect to CBD. And there's 10 states now, of those 33, where within the state, it's recreationally legal for adults to use cannabis. So shout it out. In how many states is it legal to produce cannabis? Everybody?
0.
Correct. Because there's the Controlled Substances Act from the federal government. And there is United States Supreme Court law that says that the Controlled Substances Act is valid. The use of the Commerce Clause in the Constitution gives Congress the authority to regulate cannabis. And the interesting thing about Gonzalez versus Raich is not only did they reach in the Commerce Clause to say that some big dispensary in California obviously kind of involved in interstate commerce. No, poor Ms. Gonzalez was growing a couple plants at home, you know, because she had medicinal issues. She said, how could that possibly be interstate commerce? Well, if you do any kind of studying of the Constitution, you realize that interstate commerce is just about anything, and the federal government trumps on this issue. So, okay, as the lawyer, you're saying, well, what else? Well, the world is moving toward legalizing cannabis. So my board, my executive committee, the CEO, the owner of the company would not allow me to say, it's illegal, let's go back to selling whiskey. You have to find a way to do this. And look what's going on in the world. In Canada, at that time, when we were looking at it, Canada was not yet legal recreationally, but was legal medicinally throughout the entire country. And they were already thinking about making it legal recreationally. And then as you look at this map, look what's going on in Europe. Look what's going on in South America. This is a trend that cannot be ignored, especially if you're a business like ours, where we are in total beverage alcohol, or we are in the business of modifying your mood at social occasions, relaxation. Look, that's who we are. We know it. We sell a substance that's intoxicating. We have to get involved. So look at this. In 2001, the number of countries with any kind of legal cannabis framework was 2. Today, that's over 30. And look at that progression. As recent as 2014, it was only 5. I mean, this is a snowball going down the hill really, really fast. We think the potential global opportunity for the cannabis industry, and by the way, these slides are somewhat dated, and I apologize, because this does not even include what Bob was talking about with respect to CBD alone. This is just what we, as recent as only 6 months ago, we all thought cannabis was THC kind of stuff. And guess what? Now we're thinking about CBD on its own as a component. So when I say it's a $200 billion market globally, that's just for the THC, recreational, medicinal, intoxicating version, if you will. We think that the market in the United States for recreational medical cannabis will be $96 billion. And look at this is the one that really gets everybody's attention, and ours as well, to put it in some kind of relative perspective. The size of the beer market in the United States is $117 billion. Today, the size of the cannabis market in the United States is $50 billion. Okay, that includes the black market. But look at that. That's as big as the spirits market. I think that's shocking. And so a company like us, we had to get involved. So take a look at what's going on as another trend within cannabis. Right now, 70% of the cannabis that's sold is raw flower. What we really expect to happen here, if we look at our history, is that this is going to become a branded opportunity. And you'll start to see that 80% of the revenues, if you will, come from a branded product, not necessarily just from being the grower. Right? And this is what we've seen. At Constellation Brands, we don't own every grape, every vineyard that goes into our wine. We don't own the corn that goes into our beer. Sorry, ABI, dilly dilly, we do use corn. We don't own the grain fields that go into Svedka vodka. We sell branded vodka, Svedka. We sell branded beer, Corona, Modelo. We sell branded wine, Robert Mondavi, Kim Crawford, Maomi. We buy grapes. We buy malt. We buy corn. And this is what you're going to see happening in our minds as we move forward in cannabis. So why is this important? As we take a step back as a company, we say we gotta, it's interesting where we sit in history because we're in the flower mode, we're not in the brand mode yet. It's illegal in the United States, it's legal in Canada, it's legalizing around the world, the research is starting, but how do we think about this? Okay, we're involved. We invested $5 billion Canadian dollars in canopy growth. That's how we got around the Controlled Substances Act. But okay, what is that? So I like to kind of internalize a little bit. As being a lawyer, I like history. I say, well, really what we're talking about maybe is 3 Aprils, as I try to figure out what is this product. Right? Is this April 20? Roll out 420? It's here, it's already now. We're having celebrations in Canada. Okay, well that's one way to look at this. This is here, this is now. We know what it is. It's pre-rolls, it's pills, it's joints. Is this April 1933, where Michigan ratified the 21st Amendment? By December, prohibition was gone in the United States for alcohol. In April 1933, beer was then legal under the pen of President Roosevelt in 33 states. Maybe that's what we're talking about, the end of prohibition. And how does that shape regulation? How does that shape the way we look at the market? Or is it April 1861, when the Confederacy bombed Fort Sumter and the states were in open rebellion against the federal government? Right? That ended in a very bloody war, the end of which, and I don't want to trivialize the issues, of course, of the Civil War versus cannabis, but the end of that was, as I recall, the federal government determined to be supreme. So as a lawyer in a federally regulated business, we have to take seriously the fact that the federal government does not yet see this as legal. Okay, so Jim, now you've set yourself and you kind of said, okay, can I use prohibition as a model? Can I use, we're out in the streets, it's April 20 as a model? Am I concerned about 1861? Is the federal government going to move tanks into New York if we legalize? I haven't seen that happening, right? So let's move on to the product now. Let's get over that, Jim. Let's talk about it. Well, okay, what is it? What is cannabis? You know, we all talk about cannabis market, $200 billion. Okay, I'm done, I'm going home. Well, no, I don't know. Is it flour? Is it oil? Is it vape, pre-rolls? Drinks, we like that, right? Is it drinks? Maybe it's a pill, maybe it's an edible. Is it CBD, is it THC? Dr. Smith in the back is probably cringing right now. Is it an ingredient? Right? And why do I say this? Because as we look at we need to define it as we start looking at the regulations, don't we? If I look at cannabis like we look at alcohol, and we say, I'm going to regulate it like alcohol. That's easy to do. Well, alcohol, in my mind, if we're not talking about rubbing alcohol or NyQuil, even if we are talking about those, quite frankly, really comes in a bottle or it comes in a can, right? And so the regulations, when you start thinking about it like alcohol, send you in one direction. Not just because it's an intoxicating ingredient that we have to keep out of the hands of children, but the regulations go deeper into that, right? They go, what's the route to market? Is there a three-tier system? Distributors, liquor stores, state-controlled stores. Can we put it in grocery stores? What about CVS? This whole idea of vertical integration. Well, when I think about it like alcohol, I have a model in my mind. I'm all done. Make all these regulations look like the Federal Alcohol Act. Go to the states regulate it just like they do booze. Jim, you know how they regulate booze, you're fine. How do we sell this? I don't know. You saw that earlier list. If I say that I'm going to put this in the state store, and it's vape, it's oil, it's flour, and I think about it like that, I say, okay, well, I've seen a beer truck before. It shows up at the 7-Eleven, right? The guy hauls all those crates out. Oh, he's got to have, I got my vape pens, they're in the back of the truck here. And I've got my flour over here, and I've got my oils over here, and I've got my pre-rolls, and here's my drink. They don't make that truck, right? And that's kind of crazy. If you start thinking about this like an ingredient, is this more like chamomile? Is this more like corn? I like corn, right? Dilly dilly. Corn's in everything. When's the last time you went to the grocery store, got your stuff, and then said, time for my corn stuff? Well, I gotta go down here to the corn store. Everything with corn and it's over here in this one store. My Kellogg's, my drinks, I mean, it's craziness what we see going on, and yet the regulations are going in this direction. Sell all the cannabis in this one store. Okay, well, I don't know about all the people in the audience, but when I turned 50 and I started going to the doctor, he doesn't write one prescription any longer. It's 2, minimum. Or it's 2, and then here's the over-the-counter one, right? So you go in with a little bit of a cough. Well, here's your antibiotic prescription, and pick up some Robitussin. Okay, so you walk into the CVS, you get your Robitussin. Oh, my cannabis prescription? Well, I can't get that here. I gotta go down to the cannabis store where I can buy my gummy bears, my brownies, and my drinks. I don't know, it's craziness, right? We have to get this right. We have to start thinking right now about what is it. Because right now the regulations are coming out quick. And my team can't stay on top of them fast enough, but they're demanding vertical integration. If you grow it in Virginia and you produce it in Virginia, you can sell it in this store in Virginia. Well, what if I make it in New York? Can I sell it in Virginia? Oh, no, can't do that. Well, why not? Well, it's illegal federally, and the Constitution doesn't apply. We have to get this right. We have to think about, as we're looking at what it is, in order to understand how to regulate it. I wish I had the answers to all this, but I don't. But we're looking at it, and these are the types of questions we all need to be asking ourselves. So what's next? Obviously, countries around the world are going to continue to adopt laws that legalize cannabis. Medicinally is usually the first step, recreationally is the second step. But even as they start to do that, it starts to become what forms are legal. Is it just flower? Is it just pre-rolls? Or do we allow gummy bears, drinks, edibles? In the US, there's going to be pressure on the federal government to do something, right? 1861, open rebellion right now. 33 states, complete violation of the Controlled Substances Act. Can the federal government really just sit around and allow that to go on? And okay, no, they can't. Okay, send the tanks in. Like, that's not gonna happen. They have to address this. They're working on that. We've got the States Act, which is a proposed legislation that just says, okay, if it's legal in the state, then it's okay for you to produce, manufacture, and sell it so long as you comply with the state's laws. And if you don't comply with the state's laws, then you're in violation of the Controlled Substances Act. There's Senator Schumer's Marijuana Freedom and Opportunity Act, which is quite similar to the States Act in many ways, but it adds a social justice component to it. And there's the SAFE Act, which is proposed legislation that says, okay, leave it illegal, but allow the banks to get involved. Okay. At least that takes care of the fact that there are bags and trucks of cash being used in Colorado and California and Washington and Oregon right now to pay their taxes because the banking system won't get involved. And unfortunately, we're starting to hear stories about people being robbed and even murdered to get at that money. And can California continue to be the largest money launderer in the world under federal law? We're going to do something about that. And you'll say, okay, let the banks do it. You know, the fat cats and bankers, they're okay, so as long as they get what they want, everything's fine. But we shouldn't look at it that way, right? We need to start thinking about maybe baby steps, I don't know. But how do we get to the point where eventually we're allowing the legalization, we're allowing the research that needs to happen? And we have to start addressing the most significant issues. Public safety concerns. And I know some of the panels are going to get into that today. What does it mean to drive under the influence of cannabis? Breathalyzers don't work. Oh, take a drug test. Okay, so you take a drug test that says you got so many milligrams in your blood. Yeah, okay, I had a good party 3 weeks ago. I'm fine today. It stays in your blood. Meanwhile, if I just smoked that joint 2 minutes ago, my level might be at nothing, and yet I am impaired. We have to get at these issues. Access by minors, obviously a big problem. Of course, it's a big problem, I admit, for beverage alcohol as well. We've regulated that, and we need to take some of those learnings as we move into yet another intoxicating substance. Research into efficacy. The health panel and the science panels will talk about that today. So, you know, you go, you smoke a joint, okay, everyone knows, well, maybe not everyone, we don't all inhale, but, you know, you smoke a joint and it kind of like, okay, I know what's going to happen. It's like I have a shot of whiskey, can of beer, glass of wine, right? All those rules, one joint, I kind of, or puff wine, I know what's going to happen. I have a drink of cannabis. Well, first of all, I have a drink of cannabis, and it might take 2 hours for that to affect you. So you had 3 more, right? And by the time you're done, you're sleeping on the couch and you can't move. And then what does the can say, right? Like we kind of know beer, oh, it's about 5%, 12 ounces, glass of wine, usually about 12%, takes 6 ounces. My shot of whiskey's 40 proof, or 80 proof. Well, no, if you read these cans, some of them are 10 milligrams, some of them are 100 milligrams. So now not only did I have 3 cans, but I had 300 milligram cans. I'm not having a good time anymore, right? Well, that's not good for an industry. That's not good for safety. It's not good for a growing, fledgling industry. And then, I'll get to the social and criminal justice reform. Taxation. We have to figure out what are we doing. You know, is this all about raising revenue? And criminal and social justice. While we're addressing this issue, we need to look at what has happened over the history of our country when it comes to marijuana usage. Remember, I told you that the current market for use of cannabis in the United States, $50 billion. It's as big as spirits. No, but that's all being done by Hispanics and African Americans, Jim. That's not the case. You can't have a market that big and have it only being used by minorities. And yet, why are the jails and the arrest records all skewed towards minorities? This has to get taken care of. Now, making it legal might be one way to do it, but then we have to address the wrongs of the past. So, with that, thank you all. Turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Jim, very much. And Jim mentioned the federal government. I want to mention that somewhere in the audience, Senator Schumer has sent one of his representatives to be here today, which I greatly appreciate on the Senator's behalf. Next, we're going to hear from our great neighbors in North, Canada. As Jim mentioned, Canada has gone through this process. I would say, from our perspective, the Canadian Consulate has been just a true partner for us. They're a great business partner. They're a great neighbor. They're our #1 trading partner. A lot of relations here, and we're very, very proud to have a high-level official coming to talk today. We have today, our second keynote is Khawar Nasim. He's a Deputy Consul General of Canada in New York. Prior to his New York assignment, Khawar was Canada's Consul General in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He is a career diplomat who joined the Canadian Department of External Affairs in 1993. He has served in the European Investment and Technology Division, the South Asian Trade Division, and the Trade Operations Policy Unit. Canada has gone through this already. They have gone through it, and part of our focus today is to really show all sides of this. So please welcome Deputy Consul General Khawar Nasim.
Thank you very much. I'm kind of chuckling when I see my face and it says health and safety. It just, something doesn't jive. You're laughing too hard. Okay. I'm delighted to be here. This is my first time in Rochester, and it's fabulous to see a full room, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. Thank you very much to Bob Duffy and the Rochester Chamber. You guys are great partners and friends, and I want to point out that I'm based in New York City, but we still have a strong presence in Western New York. Linda Soltis, my colleague and friend, is based out of Buffalo, and we also have Rachel Homewood in Buffalo. We are still very present in upstate New York and in Western New York. It's great to be here also with Jim. Thank you for your presentation. You stole all of my puns and jokes, so I will refuse. I'll go. Yeah, it's the burden of being second. And also to the Honorable Crystal Peoples-Stokes, thanks for joining us today. Delighted to share the platform with you. So, this speech takes me sort of out of my comfort zone. I traditionally crisscross the state and talk about NAFTA or tariffs or investing in Canada. Talk to companies like Constellation, which have major investments in Canada. We talk about cultural advocacy, cultural diplomacy. We rarely talk about our cannabis legislation, in large part because it's something that we did domestically, internally, and it's not something that we want to get out and preach or proselytize. It's not our role as the Canadian government to come in and tell our American friends, this is how you should do it, or this is what you should do. Rather, I see this as an opportunity for us to come in and say, look, here's what our experience was, here's what our motivations were, and I hope you'll take my comments in that context. This is really part of the friendly relationship that we have, the greatest relationship in the world, that between Canada and the United States. So, in October of last year, Canada became just the second country in the world to legalize and regulate cannabis. Our driving force there, the rationale, the motivation, was that we believed that legalizing cannabis would lead to a safer and healthier Canadian community, and that was the spirit that guided our approach. I'd like to use my time to talk about that approach today. And firstly, I think it's important to understand why we made those changes. While there will be no doubt economic benefits and opportunities that arrive from the legislation, the decision was made really for public health and safety reasons. Legalization and regulation allowed us to control the cannabis supply chain and restrict access to youth. The commercial opportunities were simply not the motivation for our policy change, and that's one of the things that we talk a lot about when we meet with our counterparts in other states. Our Minister of Border Security and Organized Crime Reduction is a Minister, Bill Blair, and he was the one who championed this. And what was really helpful for us, and I was explaining this to Bob, was that we had a former police chief. Bill Blair, it was the former chief police of our largest city, Toronto. Big, burly Irishman who understood the impacts and the realities of cannabis in our society, and he took 3 years in developing the policy framework around which we introduced cannabis. The history on this was that we had data which demonstrated that Canada's system of prohibition did not work. We found that it did not prevent youth from using cannabis, and furthermore, the profits, the billions of dollars in profits that were going into organized crime and nourishing those organizations. We also found that arresting and prosecuting these offenses was expensive for our criminal justice and created an impediment for offenders who, for possession of a relatively small amount of cannabis, then had a criminal record. This legal market, when we regulated it, our ambition was to take the money out of the hands of criminals, and while still at the same time restricting access to the youth. So what did we do? So in October of 2018, we implemented a new legal framework that legalizes and strictly restricts access to cannabis. Previously, Canadians were allowed to get cannabis if they had a medical condition, a recognized medical condition. But as of October of last year, any adult, 18 or 19, depending on the province, can now legally possess up to 30 grams of dried cannabis from authorized retailers. Possession of small amounts of cannabis for recreational use is no longer a criminal offense. Honorable Crystal Peoples-Stokes, one of the reasons that it's important for us to distinguish is that our policy was driven at the federal level, but the implementation happens at the equivalent of your state level, our provinces. So the application is different from province to province in Canada. It took us 3 years. 3 years, and you can imagine the criticism the government faced because it was a campaign platform of the Trudeau government in 2015. They came to government with a promise to legalize cannabis, and it took a full 3 years before that happened. Why did it take so long? I think it's because we had a chief of police running the organization and not somebody who was more entrepreneurial. What Minister Blair did was he engaged in extensive consultation with law enforcement, health and safety experts from around the world, including here in the United States, in states like California, Colorado, Oregon, which had gone through some form or process of legalization. We also focused on our efforts on mitigating some of the risks that legalization might bring. We also, for example, the government has created a new criminal offense which will make it illegal to sell cannabis to minors and added significant penalties to those who break the law. We also, from my vantage point, one of the things I was most concerned about was what was going to be the implications for our neighbors to the south. Legalizing in Canada, by definition, has implications because we have 400,000 people who cross the border every day between Canada and the United States. It is the most perverse border in the world. So we had to be very conscious of what those implications were. And I want to remind anybody who's in the audience today and anybody who is Canadian or American and considering crossing the border, it is still illegal to cross the international border with cannabis in your possession. It will remain that because it is a federal statute. And when you're driving to the border in Canada, you'll see a big marijuana leaf with a red line through it. That is part of our efforts to educate and inform the public. I was terrified last year, I'll be honest with you. I was thinking, we try in our roles to really keep the borders flowing. We try to keep people moving, commerce moving, and if there was increased scrutiny, increased delays, that would have been bad for everybody, including border communities like Rochester, who would have seen a trickle and a slowdown of people coming back and forth across the border. Fortunately, that hasn't happened, and I can breathe a sigh of relief. The government has also made significant investment into the public awareness campaign the penalty now for crossing can be up to 14 years in prison. So it is a very serious issue for us. We've also toughened our laws around drug-impaired driving. The government continues to have a zero tolerance approach to these offenses, and we've had to invest significant amounts of money in training our law enforcement officers to ensure that our roads and highways remain safe. We've also invested $100 million in public education around educating youth and the underage population as to the risks associated with cannabis and impaired driving in particular. So it's still early days. We're about 6 months into the legislation, and so typically as we government we like to draw on big pools of data and talk about trends over years and years and years. We've got 6 months, and what I can tell you is that the nerves that we had about the introduction, that it was going to be disastrous, or that we were going to have a huge flood of new users and it was going to create impairment all around it, that hasn't happened. We haven't had major incidents along the border. Knock on wood, we want that to continue. What we have seen is that there has been an increase in the purchase of drugs from legalized providers. I think the statistic was that in the first 3 months, 51% of the users were buying from, 38%, 38% of the users reporting obtaining cannabis from illegal sources in the first 3 months of 2019, which is down from 51% in the first quarter of 2018. So we are seeing a reduction in purchases from the black market. We're still not at zero. We haven't eliminated the illegal market, but we are seeing that trend. Part of the reason for that, and this is a closed door session, is that we don't have a universal policy across the board. Some provinces have done it well and have addressed supply issues. Others have not done it as well. They've kind of stumbled. I won't say which ones because I'll get in trouble, but I will say that some of the provinces have done better. And Jim, you'll know this from your own experience. So what I also want to talk about is tax revenue generated by cannabis sales. There will be an inclination in government circles to see cannabis as a real opportunity to generate revenue in what is otherwise a hard market. One of the things that our federal government committed, and I hope you're taking notes, Crystal, is that 75% of the revenue accumulated from our cannabis sales, the tax revenue generated there, go directly back to the provinces. 25% remain with the feds, but this revenue is specifically intended to defray the costs of legalization, because there are costs of legalization, including law enforcement training, equipment, public education awareness, and specifically in public research into the implications and the improvements that can be done around cannabis. So what's next for Canada? We're preparing for edible cannabis products to be legalized in October this year. Again, regulations were put in place to address the public health and safety risks posed by these new classes, and we will enact regulations that ensure packaging does not quote-unquote appeal to youth and will limit overconsumption. We're moving down the path. I think that if I were to characterize our experience, I would say that it has not been perfect in terms of its rollout, but it's gone very well, and it's gone very well because we invested a lot of time in consultations with all of the groups that were potentially impacted by this, including police, community, indigenous communities. We did that across the board, and we introduced an approach which was driven by a motivation of public health, safety, and security. One of the things that we also do is we've met with a lot of American legislators, a lot of interest groups. We've met with the governor's staff as well. Axel, we've had good conversations with staff here in New York State. We know that there's an interest in it. We're happy to share our experience, but we're Canadian and we don't brag and we don't stand on a pulpit. We just stand back and say, well, here's how we did it, eh? You might want to. With that, I say thank you very much for listening to me. Enjoy your day.
Khawar, thank you very much. He will have to leave soon. He's traveling. I listened to his schedule before. He is on the road relentlessly, so he made a great effort to be here this morning. Thank you so much for coming. We've heard a lot about the state. We have some great state representation that you'll hear more as two key officials that I think will have a great impact on the research and health of the state. But we have one of the most powerful elected officials in the state here this morning. I want to thank her so much for coming. We have Peoples-Stokes, who is the majority leader of the New York State Assembly. Crystal has faithfully served New York State's 141st Assembly District since 2003. In January 2019, she was named Majority Leader of the New York State Assembly by Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie. In June 2017, she was voted by her colleagues as the chair of the New York State Legislature Women's Caucus, which is a bipartisan and bicameral group. Crystal fearlessly fights for diversity in our state, and she's been an integral part of ensuring that minority and women-owned businesses have a fair chance of obtaining state contracts. She's also been a great leader. A pleasure to work with in my previous life. She is from our great neighboring city of Buffalo. She knows upstate, understands upstate, and there's no doubt that Majority Leader would have a huge impact on where the state goes with this in the future and how it's implemented. So please welcome our Majority Leader for the State Assembly, Crystal Peoples-Stokes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing? How was breakfast? I missed that part today. Our trip from Buffalo didn't allow me to get ready and get breakfast, so I'll do that later. But I want to thank you all for the invite to be here. Brother Duffy is missed in his previous role, but we see he's still working aggressively in the interest of business in the state. So it's always good to see you, and thank you for inviting me here. I, as was mentioned, have been in the Assembly for a while, and the work that we do there is broad and encompassing, and it's supposed to have the impact on a statewide as opposed to district-specific things. So for me, when approached about the idea of sponsoring legislation that would legalize marijuana, my first thought was, oh, no. I remember my days when my brother had just came home from college, first year at Howard, and actually found a joint in his pocket. I was mortified. I was like, oh my God, my parents are gonna kill you. Wait till I tell Dad. I threatened him for 2 weeks while he was home on his break. Whatever I wanted to have done, he did. I was able to say, if you don't do it, I'm gonna tell. And so I've transformed my life since then about this product. It's not the same how I used to feel about it. And I think how most Americans, and quite frankly, most New Yorkers feel about it. Because if you think about it, it's been at least 80 years that it's been vilified and criminalized. Prior to that, it was just a plant. And most of us are not even that old. So our entire life experience around marijuana, there's been something wrong with it, which is not true. And I think the first speaker, the gentleman who spoke from the industry perspective, kind of laid it out very clearly. You don't get to be a multiple billion-dollar industry in a country where there are only black and brown people using the product. It doesn't happen that way. And because it happened all wrong in that aspect, it has to be righted during this process. And I do think that the issue is not if we're going to pass legalization in the state of New York. The issue is when will we pass it? And if you ask me and many of my colleagues, like Harry Bronson, we would say in 2019, before the end of session. That's what we would say. But there's still some people who are not there yet. And so we still have yet some convincing to do. I will, acknowledge, the work of the Drug Policy Alliance, who has done just tremendous work on this issue. When I see Cassandra Frederick here, it's good to see you as always. But there are a couple of things that have to be included when we do legalize. One, we have to make sure that all of those black and brown people who were lapped up had their children put in foster care or either adopted away from them, literally had their communities destroyed, need some retribution here. So we gotta expunge their records. People who were convicted of low-level marijuana crimes should not have a record anymore if this becomes legal. They should not have a record. Because what happened by giving them this record, you did your 10 years, you get out, the first thing you see when you, on an application is if you're a felon or not. Well, if the employer sees you checked off that you're a felon, what's the likelihood of them hiring you? 0 to none. So you can't get a job. You can't even go and get federal loans to go to college because you're a convicted felon. You can't even live in public housing. So what are you gonna do? Most likely you're gonna recidivate, most likely. And in fact, if you look at some of the data, most of the people who are in jail now did recidivate. Because when they got out, what could they do? And so we essentially created a political problem that cost us a lot of unnecessary tax dollars. We've been locking people up and destroying their lives for like the last 80 years. And then we expect them to get out and be a responsible citizen. Well, it don't work like that. And it's clear to see it. You can look through any community where people have been incarcerated on a mass basis around cannabis. We're not talking about, we're talking about cannabis. You can look around and see. These are communities, they all look like they're everywhere in New York. They're in Utica, they're in Rochester, they're in Buffalo, they're in any urban and sometimes suburban areas where people live a hopeless life. They basically have been put out of society. And in some cases, that spells down to their children. Now we send their children to school with coming out of conflicted homes because their parents were incarcerated, got out of jail, can't get a job, can't move their life forward. And so those records have to be sealed. And some of the resources that we receive as a benefit of legalizing this product has to be invested into those people's lives. We can't keep acting like poverty is gonna go away if we don't really deal with it. We can't keep acting like it's gonna go away if we don't deal with it. So there's gotta be some resources that get expended into those communities that specifically focus on helping to transform the lives of the people. Even if we just do streets and sidewalks. Most kids can't ride on bikes in those communities because the sidewalks are all broke up. That's a small part. How about if we just do community schools where people are clamoring to get into special interest schools where students get a higher level of education? Why don't we make one of those in the communities that have been disenfranchised? Just create the school there instead of worrying about trying to get them in the same school with someone else. Create in the communities what people need to turn their lives around. There's an opportunity to do that. And I'm not saying this is in place already through our existing systems. We may have to do some things different. But that should happen during the regulation process. We should make some commitment to ensuring that resources goes into these specific communities where people have had an impact and have not had access. Secondly, there are a number of people out there. I want to say the estimated industry in New York State is about $2 billion underground every day. $2 billion, that's a lot of money. Somebody's making that. Somebody's working and it's underground. There has to be opportunities for people who are underground day one to become above ground. That has to happen. You can see in California and other places where we've been watching, the Counsel General said I should be taking notes. I've been taking notes on this topic for 8 years. You can see where they didn't engage the underground market right away. It took a long time. The black market kept growing as fast as the legal market did because you didn't engage the people who are already there. So you have to figure out a structure to engage them. And I don't think that that's that difficult, particularly in a state like New York, where we have some of the smartest and the brightest people working as attorneys all over the place, and particularly in the governor's office. They really have a good look on this one. And we have a good look on it in the Assembly, and I believe we have a good look on it in the Senate. But first we have to get it passed. And when we get it passed, it has to have those contents in it, because otherwise we're not gonna have votes. I'm just gonna be honest. there are not people who are willing to create a brand new, legal, multiple billion, trillion-dollar industry and say it's okay to leave some people while we were a part of the process during the whole time. This can't happen without that. Those things have to be there. I think we have a very good understanding how to make that happen, and I think it will have an impact on our communities. It simply will. I think if we look 15, 20, 30 years down the road and say, why did New York legalize marijuana? What was the purpose, and how can we tell that it actually worked? I think we'll see the cost of government go down. We won't need to do all the social investment that we put in people's lives when they don't have to do anything but come get it. We will see the cost of government go down. Family court grew faster than any court in this nation under these drug wars. Family court was the one that grew. That's all taxpayer dollars. All of the issues that people have that we don't fix when they grow up in poverty, go to jail, kids are not educated, all those things that we don't fix, they cost us on the other end. And they actually cost more. So if we do the right investment and do this right, I think we will see the cost of government go down. I think we will see communities begin to thrive. I think we will see people who you didn't think had the capacity to be contributing citizens become contributing citizens. And so I hope that you all will join us in this fight. And you know, you have everybody, particularly if you're from New York, you have both an assembly member and you have a senator and you have a governor. You should give them a call to make sure that before we end the session in June 2019, that we have legalized the use of adult cannabis in this country, in this state. And we will allow the opportunity, just like everybody else did, to establish a regulatory process. That's a year or two away. But at least we're going to start the legalization project. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning, and I'm happy to address any questions now or in the future.